Hello, I got a few things that I'd like to cover today. There's some things breaking in Israel and Russia and Malaysia that I feel like I wanted to cover it for just a bit. So let's get started. We're going to start off with Israel. The whole of the Middle East is almost on fire still. You don't hear a whole lot about Syria, but we'll get into a little bit of that in a minute. But this peace deal with Israel is it's almost getting laughable. It really is, of what they're expecting. There's an article here that says Abbas is defiant ahead of his meeting with Obama. Evidently, Abbas has left for the United States, and he's going to have a meeting with Obama on Monday, and he is set to demand that he's going to stay firm in his wants for the Palestinian Authority. Said that the visit to Washington is taking place during a sensitive time period and under circumstances of change in the Arab world, stressing that the Palestinian Authority chairman intends to stick to the fundamental Palestinian principles. I find this odd in the first place that they're having their meeting during Purim. Everyone knows what Purim is. Read the book of Esther if you don't. It's when Israel was liberated one other time. In a speech that Abbas gave to the Revolutionary Council at Fata in this past Wednesday, Abbas said that the Palestinian Arabs are steadfast in their positions that eastern Jerusalem will be the capital of Palestine and that Israelis will remain in the Palestinian state after Israel withdraws to the pre-1967 borders. You notice they've kept that a little bit on the quiet side. Every now and again something will come out about it. They're pushing Israel back to the pre-1967 borders, and we all know that for one thing, even a secular opinion, Israel can't defend its borders with just a little tiny strip of land like New Jersey. But there's other things about the Palestinian Authority. I just wanted to start with this article. I'm going to come back to the blog for just a minute. I posted on a title that it sounds kind of bad, but it's the truth. Allah will gather Israelis so we can kill. This was posted in Arutz Shiva, or Israel National News. It's incredible. Iran sends weapons to Gaza. Israel intercepts them, and Netanyahu and Israel are demons trying to incite and bring negative attention to the peace-loving Iran. This is so incredible. Kerry has said that the Palestinian Authority didn't need to recognize Israel as a state. He's quoted as saying this about the recognition of Israel: "I think it's a mistake for some people to be raising it again and again as the decider of their attitude towards the possibility of a state of peace, and we've obviously made that clear." This is just absolutely nuts. It's not that hard to understand that the Palestinian Authority is not only not recognizing that Israel has a right to the land that they're living in, they are continuously screaming that they're going to kill all the Jews, that their mantra is Palestine from the river to the sea. A senior Palestinian Authority official appeared on Palestinian TV on Wednesday, where he called the Israelis an advanced instrument of evil, claiming Allah will gather them so that we can kill them all. This is just absolutely insane. They have a history, and I urge you to research it and study the history from Muhammad's. He ordered all of the Jews to be killed at one time. It's called the Battle of the Trench. The Jews were made to come down, and Allah's messenger, Muhammad, imprisoned them. Then the Prophet went out into the marketplace of Medina, and they say it's still the marketplace today, and he had trenches dug in it. He sent for the Jewish men, and he beheaded all of those and buried them in that trench. I won't go into the whole thing. You can read about it or search for it on your own. But he not only did that, but he divided everything and took the wives and the children and made them slaves. This is not a new conflict with them. It goes back to an old conflict. And they're never going to recognize Israel as having a right to there. It continuously goes on where they're saying that Israel has never had a presence in the land. They have never had a presence at the Temple Mount. It's just ridiculous, and they're letting the world is demonizing Israel instead of calling the Palestinian Authority out and telling the truth. Let's play just a few. Well, the video is only 1 minute, so let's play a little bit so you can see what he was saying. There's subtitles. It's in Arabic, but they do have subtitles. Like I said, I think this is just absolutely laughable, almost. It would be if it wasn't so serious. And they think that the world believes them. And sadly, there are many in the world that do believe this propaganda that they're putting out, that Israel has no right to the land. Most of Jesus' ministry was done on the Temple Mount, and I don't know how they can deny that. Of course, they say Jesus is only a prophet anyway. But how Christians can deny this, it just amazes me.
أستاذ عباس، أيضا في موضوع تناولته وسائل الإعلام وقالت أن نتنياهو فشل في موضوع الترويج لسفينة الأسلحة المزعومة، وبالتالي لجأ إلى خيار الدم، وبالتالي هذا يفسر عدد الشهداء الذي سقط خلال 24 ساعة. يعني أنه لم ينجح في استثارة الصعيد العالم في موضوع سفينة الأسلحة، فلجأ إلى الطريقة التقليدية التي يتبعها الاحتلال الإسرائيلي، وهي طريقة قتل الفلسطينيين للحصول على ردود أفعال سريعة من الفلسطينيين. كيف تنظر إلى هذه
هلا اللي خايفين منه إنه راح نتنياهو وحاول ديماغوجيا زي ما راح يسوي القنبلة الذرية ويعمل كيف إيران بدها. فشل في الموضوع الإيراني. راح يزبط حاله في الموضوع الفلسطيني. هذول الإسرائيليين ما لهم مش دين ولا لهم مبادئ. هذول عبارة عن يعني أداة متقدمة للشر. يعني مش بيقولوا انه الهولوكوست وكذا. طب ليش بيعملوا فينا هيك؟ وبالتالي انا رايي انه الله سبحانه وتعالى سيجمعهم لنقتلهم. لأن
There you go. He is informing the murderer of his death. Allah will gather them all together so that they can be killed. Like I said, this is getting more and more ridiculous by the day. I want to move on to the Syria for just a minute. It's been 3 years since this civil war, that they call it, has been going on in Syria. And last week the UN had a lot of TV time. They were saying that the children in Syria were suffering. They were eating grass. They were living in boxes. They had disease. And it's getting really, really bad when the UN starts decrying it and the news media starts covering it, because they have covered this up. But anyway, the Guardian anyway is highlighting some of the Syrian conflict. This week marks 3 years since the start of the Syrian civil war. The conflict, which shows no sign of abating, has claimed 140,000 lives, forced 2.5 million people to flee for their safety, and left a further 4.3 million people displaced within Syria's borders. The UN estimates that 9.3 million people are currently in need of humanitarian assistance. My heart goes out to these people. It really does. I feel so bad. I pray daily for their safety, for their comfort. I don't understand how the world could let this get so bad. The agencies have issued multiple warnings and calls for help. Only this week, UNICEF and World Vision warned that with millions of children facing collapsing health and education services and suffering acute psychological distress and impoverishment, a potential lost generation is emerging. This has been going on for 3 years, and only this week, UNICEF and World Vision warned. I don't know. It's just crazy. And there's pictures here of the children and their drawings. There are concerns about the pressure refugees are putting on neighboring countries like Jordan, Turkey, and Lebanon. UN officials have repeatedly called for Europe to relax its border controls in order to ease the growing humanitarian crisis on its doorstep, and have issued multiple appeals for financial assistance. There have been thousands of Christians also murdered for their faith there has been reports of Christian villages being forced to pay a tax to Muslims or die, or convert or die. That's the options that they're offered. It's the rebels over there have just taken over, and they're linked to Al Qaeda. Anyway, let's get back to this. The public, and I believe this, has become accustomed to images from Syria and beyond being beamed around the world and has responded sympathetically. Thousands joined solidarity vigils for the campaign. They asked several people this question. 3 years ago, would you ever have imagined the Syria refugee crisis would grow to its current size and magnitude? Steve Sosaby from the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund says, I'm sorry to answer yes. I've lived and worked in the Middle East for more than 20 years and have been to Syria many times, and he's familiar with the nature of those regimes when it comes to threats to their power. From the perspective of the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency, never, 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 Yarmouk was once thriving, bustling heart of the Palestinian community in Syria, where they lived alongside Syrians of all stripes, and they all thrived. One could never have imagined that this once harmonious universe, which contained many other universes, could be reduced to a black hole with such alacrity and brutality. I'm sorry, I'm still trying to get over a cold, so I'll try to get through this, okay? But it goes on, and they all talk about it. There's a UN High Commissioner for Refugees that says, I'm not sure that anyone imagined 3 years ago the situation that we'd be in now with Syria. The scale and brutality of the conflict are some of the worst I've come across in my experience. I can see its impacts on the Syrian people I've met, particularly the women and children. This is going to go with these people for the rest of their lives. Syria is, I don't know, it's really sad. There are a couple of stories of hope here. A 14-month-old baby boy called Khalid. He looked like a 5-month-old when his mother brought him in, but with just a few days of proper food and medicine, he was brought back from the abyss, is the way they described it. And again, more photos of children. I was surprised by coming across a refugee community living in a disused railway station in Idlib province. The community had developed with a structured hierarchy, with the elders acting as counselors and the young men working the land and looking after the few cows and goats they had. I wonder how many of us in the United States could live like that, and if we could make it as long as these people have. Pray for the people of Syria, that's all I can say. I want to turn for just a minute to Egypt because they're still having a lot of conflict over there. Islamists kill 6 Egyptian soldiers. Militants shoot dead 6 soldiers at a checkpoint in northern Cairo, then hide bombs to target the first responders. You see this over and over again with the Muslim Brotherhood, and these are the very people that our president helped put in power in Cairo, and also who are infiltrating our government here. The Egyptian military, and we saw this with the Boston bombing also. The Egyptian military has blamed the attack on the Muslim Brotherhood movement of deposed President Mohammed Morsi. It came 2 days after another soldier was shot dead by gunmen. More than 200 security personnel have been killed since the army overthrew Mr. Morsi last July. The assailants opened fire on military policemen as they were finishing their morning Muslim prayers and then planted 2 bombs to target the first responders. The health ministry said 6 soldiers were killed. This just goes beyond all comprehension for me. I don't understand this. They kill people, and then they want to kill the people that are helping the people that were injured. This is just nothing but pure evil. It's pure, unadulterated evil. Okay, I want to turn for just a minute to the Telegraph. They're reporting on the missing Malaysia airline. That has growing into quite. Anyway, the plane evidently flew for 7 hours after it lost contact. They can prove this because they say that it's similar to when a cell phone is trying to locate a tower, and the tower is talking back to the cell phone. They connect for just a minute, although no data is exchanged. The cell phone tower knows that the phone was there. And that's exactly what happened to the airline, or the airplane. They connected for just a moment with a signal, and Fox News reported it as like a handshake with signals. There was no data exchange. It just let towers and radar know, hey, I'm here. Where are these people? Now they say that the plane was hijacked. Anyway, Malaysia Airline MH370 had 9/11 style terror allegations resurface in the case. Possible plot investigated after Al-Qaeda supergrass told court that 4 or 5 Malaysian men planned a passenger airliner hijack. You know, this was my first thought when I heard that they were considering that possibly it was hijacked. That was my very first thought, was what building and who are they going to attack. And actually I was thinking about Europe. You know, they have said for years that they're going to attack Big Ben or the Eiffel Tower. I don't know, but these are just reports, and this is what they say. Evidence of a plot by Malaysian Islamists to hijack a passenger jet in a 9/11 style attack is being investigated in connection with the disappearance of this flight. Security experts said the evidence from a convicted British terrorist was credible. The supergrass said that he had met the Malaysian jihadist, one of whom was a pilot in Afghanistan, and given them a shoe bomb to use to take control of an aircraft. They said this had taken a long time in the planning. They were going to use the shoe bomb to open the cockpit door, evidently. Like I said, I don't know if this is true. This is, you know, the Telegraph is reporting it, and so is the Daily Mail. It does make sense. I just pray for the 200 and some people that were on the plane. Okay, the Daily Mail is reporting that satellite data shows the hijacked plane was last seen flying towards Pakistan or the Indian Ocean as the investigators searched the pilot's luxury homes and revealed one had homemade flight simulator. That's not that in itself is not, you know, necessarily grounds to say that the pilot was involved. But here's a graph of the path that it took. It veered to the left and went towards India, Pakistan, and the West. Instead of going on to China, it was supposed to cross over Vietnam and land in China. The last known position of that plane, based on satellite data, was somewhere on these red lines, 6 hours after the last radar contact. This is the homes of the pilot and the co-pilot. And like I said, just because the pilot had his flight simulator doesn't mean that he was involved. Here are the pictures of the pilot and the co-pilot. I'm sure that everyone has seen them by now. Okay, this is a story from Daily Mail that I kind of wanted to hit on. I've not heard this either, but it says the doomed airliner pilot was a political fanatic. Hours before taking control of flight MH370, he attended a trial of a jailed opposition leader as the FBI reveals passengers could be at a secret location. Like I said, this is the first I've heard of this. This is from the Daily Mail, so we'll see. Time will tell. FBI experts say the disappearance could be an act of piracy, suggesting passengers are being held. I find it odd that if they are, they haven't contacted anyone to make their demands known. It's been 8 days now. This is all very strange. Police are investigating the possibility was hijacked, that the pilot of the missing airplane hijacked his own aircraft, and a bizarre political twist. The Mail on Sunday has learned that Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah was an obsessive supporter of Malaysia's opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim, and hours before the doomed flight left Kuala Lumpur, it is understood that 53-year-old Shah, the pilot, attended a controversial trial in which Ibrahim was jailed for 5 years. Campaigners say the politician, the key challenger to Malaysia's ruling party, was the victim of a long-running smear campaign and had faced trumped-up charges. And they go into a graph of Friday, the captain leaves his home. He had his flight simulator. They again say that. He attended the trial of Malaysian opposition leader at a court in Putrajaya. He is thought to be incensed as he sees opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim left, jailed for 5 years. Number 3 is what they're pointing out. Saturday at 12:41 a.m. the plane took off. At 1:30 a.m. the jet falls off the radar. About 45 minutes after taking off, air traffic controller lost contact with the plane over the Gulf of Thailand. The last words from the cockpit are, "All right, good night." The plane is carrying 7 hours of fuel and is cruising at 35,000 feet. At this point, the transponder is switched off or less likely fails and stops sending data on direction, speed, and altitude to the air traffic control. But the jet will continue to be tracked if in range of a radar station, which is what happened. And that's why they're saying that it flew for 7 hours after they lost contact. Who's on board? As well as the pilot and co-pilot, there are 10 other Malaysian crew members, and there were 227 passengers, including 153 Chinese and 38 Malaysians. 7 were children. Others were from Iran, the U.S., Canada, India, Indonesia, Australia, France, New Zealand, Ukraine, Russia, Taiwan, and the Netherlands. 4 people checked in but did not fly. Now remember, a few days ago they had come out and said that 2 people that they knew of that entered that plane, their passports were stolen. So we haven't heard much more about that. But anyway, they all of a sudden, at approximately 1:35 a.m., the plane makes a rapid climb to 45,000 feet and turned sharply to the west and then descended unevenly. Now, I would say that this is enough to say somebody besides the pilot wasn't in control, because I can't see an experienced pilot who had a flight simulator in his home where he was constantly training would, make jumps and turns. And anyway, that looks to me a little fishy, but I'm not an expert. I don't know. That's why they asked too, was there a struggle? The violent change in altitude is consistent with a struggle in the cockpit. Another theory was that this was a deliberate maneuver to knock out the passengers and crew. One Boeing 777 pilot who asked not to be identified said climbing above the plane's service limit of 43,100 feet with a depressurized cabin would have achieved that effect. So I would say somebody either wasn't flying it, that was the pilot, or they were struggling, or like they said, it was an attempt to knock everybody out. But that doesn't make sense to me because they have oxygen masks that fall down. I don't understand that. But anyway, 7:24 a.m. the airline announces that the plane is missing. And you can see, you can go to Daily Mail if you want also and look at this, but it shows graphic detail of the flight path. And I'm showing this because, for one thing, it's rather strange. They said on Fox News, I believe it was, that the Malaysia Airlines did not subscribe to what they called a simple GPS. Well, excuse me, an airplane, especially one that flies internationally, is going to have some type of tracking devices. They can still track that airplane. I don't understand why they're having so much trouble. But anyway, I think they're not telling everything that they know. Saturday, today anyway, they said that it's a hijack. The Prime Minister of Malaysia had a press conference and did say that it was indeed a hijacking. How they know that for sure, I don't know, but this explains the pings that I was telling you about earlier, similar to a cell phone and a cell tower. British satellite firm revealed it was picking up hourly pings from the aircraft systems 7.5 hours after takeoff. The routine radio messages, which relay data for maintenance purposes, stopped at 11 a.m. local time. The signals do not transmit location, but can be used to determine an approximate direction of travel. And I just heard on the news a little bit ago that the Pentagon has sent over the U.S. Poseidon aircraft to help track it, and it has some amazing tracking technology on it. So hopefully they'll be able to come up with something. I worry about the passengers again. Like I said, pray for the people on board that flight. I want to touch briefly on Russia. There's several reports coming out that says, this is from the Telegraph, says Russian troops in mainland Ukraine ahead of the Crimea vote. And I believe they've already voted, and the vote has passed for Crimea to unite with Russia. And they've had their meeting at the UN to say that this vote was not going to count. However, Russia vetoed it and China abstained, so the UN is powerless to do anything about this. So the Crimea has voted to join with Russia. Anyway, Russia invaded a gas facility on Ukraine mainland as Crimea is tense ahead of the referendum vote. This was a little earlier today. Ukraine mobilized its military to try to stop the Russians, but they went into Crimea and seized a gas supplier station. They also sent in helicopters and tanks, and it was not immediately clear whether the Russian landing, which would be the first time Moscow has sent its occupying troops beyond the Crimean Peninsula, was the beginning of an occupation or merely a probing exercise. An unnamed Russian official said the incursion had been made to guard against terrorist attacks. So, this is rather significant because the Russian troops appear to be on the move. Here is one by the Daily Mail, and they titled it, "Is This Proof of Russia is About to Invade? Snatched amateur pictures reveal tanks and troops on the Ukrainian border as the Kremlin is accused of fixing the vote." Remember I told you that they had their vote and Crimea voted. I don't remember what the vote was, but they voted to align with Russia. Anyway, Russian troops seized the village of Strelkov. According to Ukrainian officials, troops, helicopters, and armored vehicles took control of a gas facility. We know that's true. Foray is the first time Russian forces have moved outside of Crimea. So they're moving according to this article. Now again, I haven't heard anything else about this, but they have amateur photographs that show that they're on the move. Russian tanks and paratroopers took up positions on the Ukrainian border last night as Vladimir Putin rejected pleas from the West to pull back his forces. These exclusive amateur pictures obtained by the Mail on Sunday show tanks, armored vehicles, and multiple rocket launchers rolling into the Belgorod region in advance of today's referendum in Crimea. So, like I said, I don't know, but these pictures, this shows Russian tanks rolling into the Belgorod region in advance of the vote. Sorry about that, having a few technical issues. And here's another one, a show of strength. Russian military personnel gathered close to the Ukrainian border yesterday as tensions continued to increase. Then we have Russian troops have seized control of a village in eastern Ukraine in the first foray outside of Crimea as protests in support of President Putin take place in Moscow. So they have gone outside of Crimea into Ukraine, according to this article. A spokesman for the Ukrainian Border Guard Service said around 120 Russians took control of a natural gas distribution station in the village of Strilikov, just north of the Crimean border. The Foreign Ministry said the Russian force numbered closer to 80 personnel. And you can kind of see some of the amateur. This one is from Getty, and that last one was from Reuters. But they said the first one that we looked at was amateur photographers. Here's a Ukrainian serviceman guarding a checkpoint near the village of Salkovo. Another Ukrainian soldier is guarding. So the Ukrainians have their military out in force. Here's a map of, here's Strikolo right here. So they have actually Have they crossed the border? I don't know. It's kind of vague here, but they said that this is the first foray attempt to move into Ukraine. Okay, in a day of rising tension, they kind of summarize it for us. The Kremlin was accused of attempting to rig today's referendum on the future of Crimea. Russian paratroopers landed on a spit of land linking eastern Crimea to the Ukrainian mainland, close to offshore gas platforms, which Moscow wants to keep under its control. Remember, Moscow and Russia supply almost half of Europe's gas. The Ukraine's acting president said Russian troops massed on his country's eastern border and they were ready to invade at any time. Ukraine's military scrambled fighter planes and airborne troops to demand their immediate withdrawal. This, any way you look at it, even if they're just standing there staring at each other, somebody's going to either make a mistake or, something is going to spark and it's going to start an international incident and a world incident, possibly World War III, I don't know. But it doesn't look good. And then it shows the tensions in Ukraine were high ahead of the vote of Crimea. I just kind of wanted to point out that the reports are starting to surface that Russia's troops are on the move, headed towards Ukraine. The world situation is sliding into chaos quickly, and I just wanted to point this out because America is continuing its downhill slide, and this one really disturbed me. They forced a Air Force cadet to remove a Bible verse from the door of his dorm room. I looked up Mikey Weinstein again because he is the head of this Freedom from Religious organization, and he is describing us as Christian monsters who terrorize fellow Americans. You can't make this up. He truly is. This is the way we are being described. And it really, really opened my eyes. It really did. And Psalm 82 hits right on the head. They do not know, nor do they understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are unstable. How true is that for today? This should make every Christian in this country fall to our knees in prayer. But instead, church after church, Christian after Christian is falling into submission to a dark display of turning from God. And they choose to turn their eyes and their ears off to the Christian persecution abroad with our brothers and sisters who are facing death. And they say there's no Christian persecution in this country. Really? With something like this? He said he was going to fundamentally change America, and he has. Here's the Bible verse that the Air Force cadet had on his door. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. What's wrong with this? I don't understand. There is an organization called the Restore Military Religious Freedom Coalition that is attempting to help stop this. The Air Force Academy admitted that a cadet leader had to remove a Bible verse that he had displayed outside his dorm room because it offended non-Christians and could cause subordinates to doubt the leader's religious impartiality. Really? Mikey Weinstein, he's the Pentagon-tapped head of this organization, and he says this. It just really opened my eyes. His target is a small subset of evangelical Christianity that's called premillennial, dispensational, reconstructionist, dominionist, fundamentalist, evangelical Christianity, or just dominionist Christianity. He further characterized their target as incredibly well-funded gangs of fundamentalist Christian monsters who terrorize their fellow Americans by forcing their weaponized and twisted version of Christianity upon their helpless subordinates in our nation's armed forces. The group is asking the United States Congress to hold oversight hearings regarding what it alleges is the Defense Department's failure to abide by the constitutionally mandated separation of church and state. How ridiculous is this? I don't know. I'm just going to stop there. I'm going to let you see what's going on and say this. Pray. And also speak out. You know, call your representative, email your representatives, and tell them enough. Enough is enough. He called Dr. James Dobson, and he said he illustrates the extremist militant nature of these virulently homophobic organizations' rhetorically charged propaganda. Like I said, just understand that there is persecution in this country. No, it's not death like our brothers and sisters are facing overseas, but this is how it begins. I almost feel like it's too late, but to not speak out against this evil is wrong also, and we won't be held blameless when we're... Okay, that's all I have for today. Remember to keep our brothers and sisters enduring persecution in your prayers, especially Kenneth Bay and Pastor Saeed Abedini. And then there's a woman, Asia Bibi, whose trial is going to begin Monday for blasphemy in Pakistan. She was sentenced to death, back in 2010 because she got into an argument with a Muslim woman at a well, and they arrested her for blasphemy. Oftentimes they do that, and it's just pray for her. Pray for her that she'll be released. She has 5 or 6 children, and her family's been waiting a long time to see her. In the meantime, stay prayed up, packed up, and ready to go. See you next time.